Hi, I'm Gareth Green and welcome to this video, Cool Extended Chord Progressions, number 4 in our series of 8 videos. So if you want to see the others, of course, they're all there on the channel as well. Well, what are we doing in this video? We're still thinking about extended chords up to the 7th. We've talked in earlier videos about how you can go up to the 9th, the 11th or the 13th. But I'm starting to talk about different kind of patterns that you might want to explore. And you might notice straight away that the pattern going on here is that the bass line is moving up a third every time. I start on G, I go up a third to B flat, up a third to D, up a third to F. Now, it might have gone from G to B natural, might go up to D sharp or anything, or F sharp. You can change the accidentals, but this idea of going up in thirds. So I've got a G major 7, followed by a B flat major 7, followed by a D major 7, followed by an F major 7. And some people might be wanting to say to me, well, which key are you in then? Because it looks as if these chords all belong to different keys. Well, we've done some earlier progressions where you can relate the chord progressions to a particular key. What I'm now saying is, it's perfectly possible to have something that's a bit less functional. In other words, where you've got chords that you can recognize and identify, but they don't necessarily have to belong to each other in the sense of being chords that all belong to the same key. So you could just say, I'm just using these as non-functional chords. In other words, chords we can identify, chords we can name, but we're just saying, I like the color of G major 7, followed by the color of B flat major 7, followed by the color of D major 7, and so on. So what are these 4 chords that I've written? This is what they sound like. G major 7, B flat major 7, D major 7, and F major 7. So it's quite an interesting chord progression, but you see this bass going up in thirds. Now, obviously, you can't write endless chord progressions that keep going up in thirds because you'll get to the point where you're up in the sky and you fall off the top of the keyboard, and it wouldn't make a lot of sense. But as a progression along the way, sometimes this is quite a nice way of thinking about things. Now, there are all sorts of conventions here that some people might be feeling sensitive about, apart from the fact that these, neighboring chords don't belong to the same key. Some people might say, well, isn't there a false relation going on? We've got F sharp here, we've got F natural there. Are we allowed to do that? Well, in conventional terms, false relations are something we're advised to look out for. But when you're getting into something that's more of a modern style, well, you might think, I'm not going to worry too much about that. And in fact, I'm even going to embrace it. Here's another one. I've got an F sharp in this chord followed by an F natural in that chord. So, sometimes if you put those things too close together too quickly, you hear a slight jarring in those false relations. By the way, just to be clear, false relation, when we have a note with one accidental followed by the same note with a different accidental in a different octave. That's a false relation. So something we generally guard against conventionally, but actually if you kind of separate this out a bit, it doesn't sound too bad in this style. And one thing I think about extended chords is once you get into extended chords, these things actually become slightly less of an issue, which is interesting. You might also look at this and say, well, haven't we got consecutive fifths and things going on in these parts? Well, yes, we've got a bit of that going on as well, but don't let it worry you too much when you're dealing with extended chords in what is a slightly different style from something that's more conventional. You could organize these chords without those kind of problems, but it's not such a big deal. So listen to those chords again in the light of, oh, there are consecutive fifths going on here, or parallel fifths, you might know them as, and we've got these false relations going on. And we've got all these extended chords coming from different keys. Have a listen to the chord progression and think, yeah, actually, is that something I can do business with? Or is that beyond the pale? Actually, I think it works quite effectively. I mean, it could be quite dramatic, couldn't it? You could just have those as 4 block chords. You could start them quietly and crescendo as the thing climbs. Could be quite dramatic, couldn't it? You could do something like fill in with a few passing notes, passing tones, things like this in a melody. And get a bit of a melodic line into it, or do something in the bass. Or a bit of both, or break up the chords. You can make it really quite ethereal if you want to, or you can make it kind of quite stabby and kind of... do something different like that. Lots of possibilities. The great thing is that this is designed to kind of give you a bit of confidence using extended chords, but also to kind of invite your musical imagination to engage with this. If I've got these 4 chords, how would I get a melodic line to work over the top? How could I get a bass line moving? What would happen if I do it quietly and slowly? What would happen if I did it kind of loudly, fast, punchy rhythms? What if I do something in between? What if I arpeggiate things? What if I try to get movement into the middle parts? What if I take these chords and just reorganize the voicing of the chords or the spacing of things? So many different things you can kind of pick up and skills you can develop, particularly if you're a keyboard player or a guitarist, just looking at these 4 chords and then thinking, okay, well, if those are extended chords that work, what other extended chords can I make work? And furthermore, how do I get these progressions to stitch together? But this one is really focused on the idea that even if you've only got 4 chords, you could have 4 chords that all belong to different keys, and we never really settle in a key, but we just enjoy the progression. And this notion of a bass climbing in thirds. So that's ideas that you might want to explore a bit further. Well, if you've enjoyed this video, let me invite you to have a look at our website, www.mmcourses.co.uk. Lots of things you'll find on the homepage there, courses, Maestro's program, lots of other things. One of the things you might want to have a look at is the merch page. Well, we've got t-shirts, we've got coffee mugs, all on musical themes, and even things like the coffee mugs are designed to be helpful to you. There's one with a circle of fifths on it. So circle of fifths is just a sort of fundamental thing to understand. Just imagine every time you sip on your coffee, you could be looking at the circle of fifths and learning it, because you get to the point where once you've seen it often enough, you just know your way around it. You'll know all your keys, all your key signatures, which are the relative majors, the relative minors, which are the neighboring keys. Fantastic liberation to be able to do that. We've got another coffee mug that's got chord progressions, standard diatonic chord progressions. So if I'm now on a chord 4, what would be the most likely next chords? And there's kind of a little diagram that shows you that. You could be sipping on your coffee, learning useful chord progressions. So there is even educational content on our merch page. But if you have a look at that, it will be well worth looking at. And the other thing you can find there is the Music Matters theme, because lots of people hear the Music Matters theme on our videos and they say, oh, I'd like to be able to play that actually. Well, we made the scores available for a huge range of instruments, and it's got a piano accompaniment part if it's not the piano score you're looking for. So if you play the trombone or something, you could play it on your trombone and invite a pianist to play the piano part. We've even got a recording of the piano part, so you could play your trombone part and play it with the recording of the piano part. So anyway, lots of things on the merch page. So do have a look. Music bag, you see, that's another thing that's on there. Lots of people need a music bag to carry their music around. why not have a Music Matters music bag? There's hoodies. Well, they're wonderful things to have, aren't they? Or you might be looking for a gift for a musical friend. Where better to look? Anyway, merch and much more at www.mmcourses.co.uk.